Russell's descriptivism has epistemological, semantic, metaphysical, and logical components, but it is originally an epistemological theory. There are two ways of knowing: knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description. When I know my pain, I am directly acquainted with that pain. So it's an example of knowledge by acquaintance. But when I know your pain, I know it by description. So when I interpret the sentence, or when I believe that the author of metaphysics is wise, that belief is not about the author of metaphysics, that object, because I'm not directly acquainted with that object. Instead, when I analyze that belief into components, that object is not, the author of metaphysics is not the part of that sentence. That sentence is not about that object. Instead, when I analyze that sentence, we have only concepts, variables, and quantifiers. So Russell rejects traditional subject-predicate analysis of sentences. Let's go on with this traditional analysis of sentences, traditional Aristotelian subject-predicate analysis of sentences. For example, this sentence, all men are mortal, according to this traditional analysis, is about these subjects, all men. Or the second sentence, some philosophers are smart, is about some philosophers, because some philosophers is the subject. A sentence is about its subject for the traditional analysis. Same for this example. And for the present king of France is bold, the sentence is about the present king of France. But for Russell, these sentences are not about these objects, these subjects, these grammatical subjects, because we are not directly acquainted with these subjects. So then surface grammar is misleading. Grammatical subjects, these subjects, and the logical subject, real subject, is not the same thing for Russell. Let's now go on with Russell's analysis of these sentences. For Russell, we have quantifiers, variables, predicates, and logical constants to interpret any sentence or to form belief. For example, the interpretation of all men are mortal is in this way. And in this interpretation, we do not have all men as its component, because we have only universal quantifier, a variable, and we have predicates man and mortal. We have logical connectives, but we do not have all men as its constituent. Same for this one. This is the real deep interpretation of this sentence. So in this interpretation, we do not have some philosophers as its constituent, or in this one, we do not have no fish as its constituent. Or in this one, when you say the present king of France is bold, or the present king of England is bold, or the president of United States is bold, in the logical analysis of this sentence, we do not have this grammatical subject. Instead, what this sentence says is that there is at least one present king of France. There is at most one present king of France. These two means there is exactly one present king of France. But since we do not have numerical quantifier, we have to analyze this numerical quantifier exactly one into these two components, at least one and at most one. And this sentence also says whatever is a present king of France is bold. So conjunctive form of these three propositions is what this sentence means. And in total, this is the interpretation of this sentence. In this interpretation, we do not have the present King of France as its component. So we do not have the problem of assigning a denotation for this part, because this sentence is not about that object, since we are not acquainted with the grammatical subjects of sentences. Russell solves three logical puzzles with his theory that's important for philosophical logical theories. The first puzzle is the substitution puzzle, which you are familiar with since you already studied in Frege's work. Scott is the author of Waverley. There is one and the same object. Scott and the author of Waverley are one and the same object. Suppose George IV wished to know whether Scott was the author of Waverley. By substitution, if Scott and the author of Waverley are one and the same object, and by substitution we have this conclusion. But this is problematic because truth of these two does not guarantee the truth of this one. No rational person wished to know whether Scott was Scott. Russell's solution is that once we interpret this sentence, or at least a part of this sentence, into logical form, we will see that the author of Waverley is not a constituent of this sentence or its meaning. The author of Waverley is not a constituent of its meaning. So then we cannot make this substitution, because in this substitution, Scott is substituted for the author of Waverley, but according to this analysis, the author of Waverley is not a constituent of the meaning of this sentence. So then, since the substitution here is problematic, the puzzle is dissolved, right? You may call it dissolution or solution. The second puzzle is the law of excluded middle. The present King of France is bold is a false sentence, right? Let's say it's P. If P is false, then not P must be true, because P or not P, right? This is the law of excluded middle. P or not P must be true. But when you say the present King of France is not bold, that's also false. The solution is that, so it seems like it violates the law of excluded middle, but the solution is to interpret this sentence, or to interpret this sentence in terms of first order logic, then to see the use of negation here. We may interpret this sentence as there is a present King of France. There is exactly one present King of France, because of the here, exactly one present King of France, and that person is not bold. This is that interpretation. If we interpret this sentence in this way, we may interpret, then this would not be the negation of first one. So negation has a narrow scope here. This interpretation, this meaning here, is not the negation of the present King of France is bold. Rather, the negation of this sentence or this proposition is this one. It is not the case that there exists exactly one object that is present King of France is bold. So once we interpret this sentence in this way, then this would be true. But if we interpret it in this way, this would be false, but that's not a problem for us, because this is not the negation of this one. So we cannot say that this is P and this is not P. Instead, if this is P, this one is not P. P or not P holds, because this one is false and this one is is true. This is the solution of this puzzle. The third puzzle is a very important problem in the philosophy of language literature, also in the contemporary philosophy of language literature. When you say Pegasus does not exist, the question is, what does not exist? I mean, if there is no Pegasus, then how can you say that that object does not exist? According to the traditional analysis, because for traditional analysis, this sentence, since Pegasus is the subject of this sentence, the sentence here is about Pegasus, but you say that that object does not exist, there is no Pegasus. There are several solutions for this problem. The first one is Frege's solution, which you remember, Pegasus does not have a reference but has a sense. So you need to have this sense reference distinction in order to adopt Frege's solution, but Russell argues against it, since the relation between sense and reference is mysterious for Russell. You may check the paper for that argument. And the second solution is Alexis Meinong's solution. For Meinong, any denoting phrase denotes an object, no matter that object subsists or not, or in other words, we may say exist or not. So Alexis Meinong's ontology, his sophisticated ontology, consists of objects that do not exist. Russell rejects that solution as well, and in Russell's solution, which you may predict, we have here its logical analysis. When you say Pegasus does not exist, what you mean is that there is no object that is both horse and that has this property of flying. So Pegasus is not the component of this sentence. So we do not have the problem of what does not exist. Instead, we have this interpretation. It is not the case that, or there is no any object in our domain that is horse and flying. That's the end of Russell part. Thanks for listening.